No compromise. Unga side liyo, enga side liyo.
GT Holidays, South India's #1 travel brand.
அயன் சத்து தலைமுடி உதிர்தலை தடுக்கும் மிதமான சூடு பாலில் கலந்து பருகலாம்.
Lion Date Syrup
தினமும் 2 ஸ்பூன்.
உங்க டாய்லெட் கிளீனர் பைசன் டாய்லெட் கிளீனர் குவாலிட்டியை விட பெட்டர்னு நிரூபிச்சா உங்க மொத்த பணமும் ரீஃபண்ட்.
இப்போது 79 ரூபாயில்.
Rear wing, they all have, but it's only attached to one side. Unfortunately, I don't know what's caused a bracket to fail, but his Lamborghini, if it wasn't handling well at the start of the race, is certainly not going to be handling very well at all right now.
Well, that might explain the difficulties he's been having. Is perhaps that rear wing, there was something wrong with it from the get-go, and well, I suppose this is more like Indianapolis.
A team lap, trying to work out what exactly is going on. He follows it by 2:minute 10, so his tyres must have gone, but it certainly means that Alexander Bukinsov should be moving his Audi ahead of the LM Corsa Ferrari. But I think maybe Kei Nakanishi got caught a little bit in traffic, because suddenly to drop by about 3 seconds in one lap, that's a big surprise.
Yeah, might have caught a gaggle of 992 Porsches maybe, or just not able to overtake, for instance, one of the GT4 BMWs for Cherney Motorsport. I suddenly have a question in my mind. Yes, you've got to use the tyres from yesterday's qualifying in the race. Do you have to keep them as a set of tyres, though? Or could you just put one on at a time? Because this being a clockwise circuit, would you therefore not just occasionally put a front right old tyre from yesterday on and just burn through them that way? I don't think it says it in the regulations that they have to be put on as a full set. The downside of that is that you're going to compromise potentially 12 stints if you use them one by one. But you could certainly change, for instance, front tyres on a rear-wheel drive car, and it would have less of an impact if you chewed through them in that direction. It's certainly something that some of the really clever teams, experienced teams like Herbert might have thought about, but then again, they don't need to think about it because they didn't do any running in qualifying yesterday. That's the way that the WEC works these days to limit the tyre wear, is to use them one by one. Mercedes are together on the back straight for Viper Racing as we can welcome into the race. There are 2 more races in the Middle East Trophy, and then when we get to the summer season, the European season of the 24-hour series, we'll be going back to Mugello at the traditional day at the end of March, Spa in April, Paul Ricard in June. The Nürburgring is a brand new venue, amazingly, because you would have thought in its proximity to the Netherlands, would have thought about an opportunity to go to the Nürburgring in the past. That will be on the Grand Prix circuit, but 3rd, 4th and 5th of July for a new location, and then the Barcelona 24 hours. So actually only one 24-hour race outside of Dubai in the European season, with all the rest of them being 12 hours, either straight the way through or in a split format from one day to the next.
Looks like the tyres are now starting to show their punishment under the heat, and of course a circuit that in places really does load the tyre. There's a lot of quite fast corners that are really putting the tyre through its paces and spiking the temperature through it. We're now into the kind of mid 207s. The best lap of the race so far by a considerable margin is race leader Luke Hartog, a 204.8 he put in early on. So we're now into we're pretty much 3 seconds slower than that now. So we're still, what are we, 15 minutes really from the first scheduled GT3 pit stop, so got to try and keep the tyre underneath you for just that little bit longer.
But lost out to Robert Renauer. That's over 5th place, and it's looking quite juicy, because certainly at the moment Ayrton seems to have his tyres working rather better than the car in front. But Dominic Ang, maybe because he pressed super hard in those opening laps to gain 2 positions to move up to 4th, but this is one that's shaping up nicely. But in fact, you almost feel
has just a handful of seconds from Robert Renauer, so that's the one that could get very interesting over the next few laps in this closing point to the first stops. Robert Renauer surely targeting getting by the Climax Racing Mercedes before they appear on pit lane for the first time.
By the way, it took them 20 minutes to get the car from there back into pit lane. Just a good reference for everybody else to understand the sort of mechanics of this circuit and how you can get cars back, because that is something that the Creventic series do so well, getting your car back to the garage so you can continue. Doesn't happen in all series, but the structure of the circuit matters, and so now we have a bit more of an idea.
24H series, but sounds fantastic, looks brilliant, but does still have its problems from time to time. But it's part of the rich mix of what we have here in the 24H series.
I mean, remembering back to their touring car themed Vortex. I think they were still called Vortex or
GC Automobile.
GC Automobile is the BMW lookalike, which I was trying to recall. But yeah, that was a Vortex team car, but they were called GC Automobile. There were a lot of tie wraps on those, I seem to remember. Whereas this is much more cleverly designed technology. But that's the nature of a endurance race, is that you've got to fix things very quickly indeed. Thankfully, repairing a rear wing on a Lamborghini didn't quite come to tie wraps, because that would have been a tough ask of a couple of plastic straps. But clearly that quick fix on the Vortex might be a temporary measure before they can attack it with more fulsomeness later on in the race. These two Mercedes, Peter Mackay, are definitely getting closer to one another now. Identical machinery, and Ayrton Redont superseding his own AM Plus rating. He was impressive when he was defending from Robert Renauer at the start of the race, and he's hauling in Dominic Ang.
Yeah, and Dominic Ang is one of the stronger drivers in that Viper Niza crew. He's had success in Asian Le Mans series and multiple wins in the Malaysian Endurance Series as well in an AMG, so knows AMGs well. So for Ayrton, this is good track time, I would say, because you're following someone who knows the circuit absolutely inside out and back to front. The thing I would maybe be slightly concerned about here, and particularly that in the context of one of the Mercedes AMGs, a lot of the drivers talk about how the new fresh tyres on. Luckily, though, the Vortex is back going again. It's back out on track.
It is, but it's not up to race speed, which is a concern for Victor Moutinho, who now takes that over. That was a 6-minute and 50-second stop. The one thing I've just noticed is how low-slung the rear wing is on that Vortex. It almost looked a little bit like a Peugeot hypercar before they put a rear wing on that car. So sometimes the high wing is the way to go. Whether that is track specific, I'm not quite sure, but I did wonder for a moment whether it had lost its rear wing. It is there, but just at kind of level with the very back of the car.
It is, and it's incredibly low because the car goes up over the cockpit, but then the tail away and the massive vortices on either side of the car going through, it really is super aero strong. In fact, you almost suggest it may not need a rear wing, because unlike the GT3 cars, which are ostensibly, road car shaped and road car derived, I just want to pick out one thing though. Robert Renauer absolutely flying in third place. He's just a second and bit, 1.8 seconds off the tail of Tanat Sati and Tirakul. And closing all the time, third place, chasing down second. Luke Hartog, though, 16.5 seconds clear. Every lap he's pulled further clear in his Porsche from the Climax Racing Mercedes of the Thai driver. But certainly Robert Renauer is on the move. But yeah, the clock is counting round. We've got 52 minutes already completed on this clock. Who's going to blink first? Who's going to come in and charge down to get a new tank of fuel?
In the 992s, as the tyres have worn, the advantage has gone in the favour of Rick Breukers, and we know how good Rick is in the wet when things get a little bit loose and slippy. And I wonder if that same theory applies, because he's about 6 seconds ahead now of Paul Meyer, when in the early part of the stint they were really closely matched, only a second or two at the most between them. But Meyer now, a few laps ago, he was having big oversteery moments, and seems like the tyre is not quite staying underneath him as well as it is for Rick Breukers.
Oh dear, the Vortex has pulled to the side of the circuit. Very unfortunately, looks as though that is just on the exit of turn 13 before the cars go through to turn 14 and up the back straight. And the Vortex, it was very slow on its outlap for Victor Moutinho.
Deal with an on-track incident like we have right now is Red Ant Racing in, as are Viper Niza Racing, but you only get 25% of your fuel allocation unless you're an AM class car. Then you get 40%. So, but usually when it's code 60, teams like to just do a little bit of a top-up.
Ayrton Redont finally breaking the stranglehold that Dominic Ang had on those positions. They both pitted together, actually, but that was the change for fifth place that put Redont ahead of Dominic Ang. And now the Mercedes, well, the first of them, having done its more regular pit stop, i.e. out the front of the garage, now goes into the 20 km/h speed-limited fueling area to the smart pumps. The next question is, at which point, this doesn't matter for this argument, because the Mercedes were in pit lane after the code 60 had been put out. It'll still be green when you get to the pit lane entry.
That's my understanding.
So where's the advantage?
The advantage is
you get a full
it's
tank
going code 60.
No, you don't.
Why not? No, during Code 60 get 25%, but if you've already entered the pit lane, this is the query we're raising.
No, the pump knows as soon as. So if imagine you're at the fuel pump and you're filling up.
But that strategy is so complex, and I feel as though some of our Chinese teams, our Asian teams, sort of copying what's going on initially.
The advantage now, in my mind, is actually at the end of a Code 60, because if the nozzle is attached when you're in the final 5 seconds of a Code 60 and it clears, you're then allowed full.
No compromise. உங்க சைடுலயும் எங்க சைடுலயும்.
GT Holidays, South India's #1 travel brand.
அயன் சத்து தலைமுடி உதிர்தலை தடுக்கும் மிதமான சூடு பாலில் கலந்து பருகலாம்.
Lion Date Syrup
தினமும் 2 ஸ்பூன்.
உங்க டாய்லெட் கிளீனர் பைசன் டாய்லெட் கிளீனர் குவாலிட்டியை விட பெட்டர்னு நிரூபிச்சா உங்க மொத்த பணமும் ரீஃபண்ட்.
இப்போது 79 ரூபாயில்